Mark Benson. I live in Oak Park, Illinois. I am a NASA Solar System Ambassador, and I'm also an Adler Planetarium Telescope volunteer. And when I can't do events in public, I make people come online with me. So tonight in the screen next to me, I have Alyssa Carson, who is one of the youngest astronaut trainees in the world with a very, very, very long set dream of going to Mars. So we're going to talk to her tonight. So, and you're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Correct. Okay, great. So thank you, Alyssa, for joining me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Happy to be on here, share a little knowledge about space, and just chat about it.
Yeah, good. You're obviously you're at home right now, like everybody else is. I'm guessing you have school that you're just doing from home, like everybody else. You're in college, and tell us a little bit about school stuff.
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of how it all happened for me was basically, I was at school, which I go to Florida Tech, which is in Melbourne, Florida, so a little
Okay.
ways from home. And so I'm currently majoring in astrobiology there. And yeah, so I came home for spring break. And I was just kind of hanging out, and then, school shut
You
down
don't
and
get to go back. Yeah.
everything shut down. So I ended up kind of just staying home. I left literally everything at school. The majority of my clothes, all of my belongings were kind of down in Florida. But I just kind of stayed
Yeah.
home and kind of just used whatever I had here, and kind of been there since. Just recently ran down one quick weekend to go pack up everything before they threw it away for the end of the semester. But
Yeah, they let you in to clear out some stuff. That's
right,
good.
they're nice enough to allow me to do that. So
Yeah.
so all packed up now. Finished up the semester online and starting a couple online classes, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah. Okay, good. Everybody at home is safe and healthy and everything.
Right, yeah, we definitely haven't gotten out too much. Just kind of stayed home for the most part.
Yeah.
Especially because like we have my grandmother in the house, so definitely wanted
Okay.
to like keep her. So
Yeah.
definitely keeping, since she's kind of in that high risk area,
Right, right, right.
trying
Yeah.
to keep her safe. So.
Okay, good. So basically a long time ago, which, I suppose relatively speaking, a long time ago, you were watching a cartoon, and in the cartoon, people went to Mars. And from kind of that point, it was kind of set in your head that why should only cartoons get to go to Mars? Right? That doesn't seem particularly fair. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of idea got into your head that this is what you are now directing your life toward.
Right. I mean, kind of the cartoon and the whole idea of kind of like the backyardigans kind of starting this thing is really the best guess that me and my dad can come up with for
Right.
why I would have gotten interested in talking about space or about Mars. My dad does remember me like coming and asking questions about Mars when I was super young. And really the only reason we have to point towards the backyardigans is because I had like the poster of the backyardigans mission to Mars like hung up in my bedroom.
Yeah.
And then one day we just kind of looked at it and we're like, oh, maybe that's it. But no one in my family really had any sort of science or space background, so it's not like Mars was a common topic in the household.
Right. Right.
So me coming and asking questions about Mars was kind of bizarre, just because he was trying to figure out where I would even heard the word Mars to begin with.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the Cardigans is kind of what we think sparked it. And then as I got older, I ended up going to space camp for the first time in Huntsville, Alabama with my dad, and we did a parent-child for the weekend. And space camp kind of just like solidified that I was totally in love with space and kind of was
Yeah.
obsessed with everything. And so that kind of propelled me on my path since.
All right. So you would definitely say that I was going to ask, it goes from being at some point the thing goes from being this like you had a backyard against Mars thing on your wall. I had, baseball posters on my wall. I'm clearly not playing baseball. So that clearly didn't catch on quite the same way. But at some point it goes from being just this kind of kid dream to being, hey, actually this isn't just this kind of crazy kid thing. This is, and as a kid, it's not going to seem crazy to you. It's going to seem, well, yeah, I'm going to go do that. But I was guessing that at some point it even occurred to you that, this is actually becoming kind of a real thing? And was that space camp, or was it something else, or did you meet somebody, or was it someone you started to pay attention to? What was it, do you think, that really made it like, this is real, this is something I'm going to do?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Space Camp was a huge help for a lot of aspects, I would say. It really helped in terms of like kind of figuring out what I wanted to do exactly.
Yeah,
Just because, Space Camp, you get to do like simulated missions. You get to play the role of an astronaut. And so, like, one time I'd go to Space Camp and play, let's say, a commander, and the next time I'd be in mission control or, however it may be. So I was actually gaining exposure to almost like pretending to be so many roles within NASA or astronauts or mission
right,
control or, whatever it might be. So I was actually learning a lot about each position. So being able to kind of realistically see what I would want to do in the future, because obviously astronaut isn't necessarily, a job. You have to have something. Um,
right,
you have to have some kind of career. So that's kind of how kind of things merge into more of a career. So that's why I definitely think Space Camp kind of helped solidify everything, because it went from
right.
something, being an astronaut, going to Mars, which was not something you could just like go to school for and like
Right.
accomplish. It just kind of brought everything to a more, I guess, realistic level.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I actually had a similar note to what you just said about astronaut being not being a job per se.
Mhm.
I had a note about that in here too, in terms of the different things. An astronaut is almost like a collection of skills, not, you don't learn the astronaut skill. You learn a collection of skills, and that qualifies you for one part of a mission or another, one part of that team. So I definitely have that in here to get into. But I want, as long as we're on Space Camp, we'll go kind of, chronologically here. So people have heard about Space Camp. I heard about Space Camp growing up. It was where I always wanted to go. I was a big fan of the stuff when I was little. I never had that opportunity to go. But people hear about it. They go, oh, Space Camp, Space Camp, Space Camp. But I don't know how many people, unless they're seriously considering it at that moment, really look into what happens there. What is Space Camp? So if you could, I know you've been to, there's a lot of space camps. You've been to all of them, I think. Is that one of your records you have? You've completed all of the space camps?
Yeah, so I went to, so basically NASA has officially named like NASA space camps, and there was
Right,
like the one in Huntsville, there was one in Laval, Canada, and one in Izmir, Turkey. So those were, claimed as like official NASA space camps. And
right.
so basically I went to the one in Huntsville, of course, and then being there, met someone who worked at Space Camp Turkey. She encouraged me to go over there. So then I went over to Space Camp Turkey, and that was a lot of fun. And then after that, Dr. Barnhart, who was the CEO at Space Camp in Huntsville, was like, "Well, now you have to go to the one in Canada," and she was just, trying to get me around going to all the different ones around the world.
Yeah. So how does Space Camp go? Is it, I mean, the real nuts and bolts of it, just to give people, so people can kind of picture it. You go there, you stay there for, I mean, is it a week? Are there different lengths of time? You're living in dorms or bunks with other people who are attending. You're doing classes. You're doing simulators. Kind of walk us through what is a day like of Space Camp? What is that like? What are you doing?
Yeah, so Space Camp is pretty diverse. I mean, so they have programs for ages 9 to 99. So they have adult camps, kids for younger kids, and so basically the just typical Space Camp is kind of broken up into age ranges. So you'll have Space Camp, Space Academy, Advanced Space Academy, and the only differences between them is you do slightly more stuff. So like Space Camp, you might do one mission, but Space Academy you'll do two. But basically, yeah, it's just
Hmm.
broken up by age ranges to be around people in your age group.
Yeah,
And so during the typical week, typically it is for 1 week. So you show up on Sunday, graduate Friday. And then, yeah, so basically you're living there at the place, you're doing simulated missions, all sort of simulators. There's a lot of teaching about space history, space facts, that kind of thing. You kind of walk through all of those things.
right,
Um, and then Space Camp also has different programs as well. So they also have a robotics program, cyber program, and kind of an aviation program, which is a lot more military style.
sure.
And so kind of you can kind of pick your interest for when
Sure.
going.
If you're kind of
Basically,
going maybe the Air Force route
right.
to eventually apply to be an astronaut, sure.
Right, exactly. So for example, like the aviation route, you do patrolling, you march in lines, everything's very official, like I said, very military.
Right.
They wake you up super early. You have to present flags. It's very, very proper. You go through the whole thing. It's very funny because all of the space camp kids are always scared of all of like the aviation kids, because basically we all eat in the same area, and all the aviation kids are required. They can't. They all have to eat at the same time. So you get your food. You stand by your chair. You stand like at a parade rest, and you wait until your instructor tells you to sit, so everyone screams yes sir, yes ma'am, all at the same time. So then you have all the
Right.
little camp kids that get scared of all the screaming, and think they're really intense people. But yeah, no, it's loads of fun to just be around people with similar interests and just kind of share those ideas, and being able to do fun projects, experiments, or simulations, simulators, all kinds of things like that.
So your first one that you went to, that when things really kind of started to click in, that first one, how old were you when you did that one? How young can you be to go to space camp?
Right. So I was actually 7 at that time. So for like the week-long program, you have to be 9 to do it. So the one I
Okay.
did at 7 was like, at the time they called it parent-child. So your parent had
Okay.
to do everything with you. Your parent was there, and it was only for 4 days. So it was just kind of like a
Sure.
long
Like a
weekend.
weekend, yeah.
Um, right. And so that's kind of the program I did. I think now it's family camp. They've kind of rebranded it to be more like family camp. So
Yeah.
mom, dad, multiple kids, the whole family can go at once now. But yeah, so basically I went with my dad for that long weekend at 7. And then yeah, and just kind of hung out. We did, some things, but obviously it wasn't quite as intense as like the full week long would be.
Right. What is your, and maybe this has changed over, because you've been to a few different countries, and over many years as you've gotten a little older. So maybe this has changed, but do you have a favorite activity? As you mentioned, simulators and class and training and all these different things you do. Is there something where before you would if you're packing to go to the next space camp, you're thinking, I can't wait to get into this again, or I can't wait to do that one thing again? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, one thing that is pretty cool over on the aviation side, they have a centrifuge, which is pretty
Okay.
exciting. So basically, down on that side of the main campus, they have the centrifuge. Typically, students go up to 3.2 Gs. So it's just a pretty cool experience to be able to feel the pressure, and kind of just have like those weird sensations of feeling it. A pretty popular simulator that a lot of the kids usually enjoy is the multi-axis trainer. So basically, it just
Okay.
simulates a tumble spin in space. So you sit in this chair and you tumble
Okay.
all
We've all seen that.
directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of a fan favorite, I guess.
Yeah.
Something I really enjoy. So they have a underwater astronaut trainer. So they have, I think it's like 24 feet deep, a tank. And so you can actually go scuba diving in that. Another way to simulate, semi weightlessness and those kinds of
Right.
sensations. So scuba diving is always pretty cool because, you can have no scuba experience. They'll run you through everything. And, for the first time, you can be able to feel what it's like to go scuba diving.
Yeah.
So super cool because you're exposed to so many new activities.
Yeah. So when was the last time you did? I mean, have you aged out of space camps? Can you still go to space camps?
So I have like aged out, I guess, of like the kid camps, because they go to 18. Um,
Okay.
so I
So
guess
just
if I
barely, but yeah.
just barely. So I would assume, I guess, like if I were to go now, I would be in the adult camp, I guess.
Sure.
So I mean, obviously, I'm not going as regularly as I did when I
Yeah.
was younger, but definitely, I guess now space camp is more of like a family of going and like helping them out with stuff, or doing whatever we can for them.
Yeah. Did you have, and it could have been someone you met at camp, it could have been a camp mate, it could have been a teacher at camp, or just some other, you've done, anyone familiar with you, they've seen you've done TED Talks, you've been on some NASA panels, you've definitely covered some ground and met some amazing people. Do you have someone that is you kind of look up to over the last 10 or so years when you've really been going hard at this stuff? Someone that whether you've met them or not, that you want to read about them, learn more about them, meet them, whatever. Do you have kind of a space hero?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there has been so many people that's kind of helped me along this way. I mean, a couple people who work at NASA that have offered, great advice just throughout the years. Bill Parsons, John Conley have been, super supportive, and being able to chat with them, meet with them, and that kind of thing. But even, just at camps and even, the counselors and stuff sometimes are extremely helpful when looking towards, trying to do something like become an astronaut. I remember I was actually going to Virginia Space Flight Academy, which is a camp they have at the Goddard facility.
Okay.
And I was there, and my counselor happened to be a college student at the time at Embry-Riddle University. And so she was basically telling me about this program that her university was starting, but she didn't really know if I would be able to do anything with it because of my age, but she said it would be worth a phone call. So that ended up being Project Possum, which obviously I am extremely involved with today. But that's kind of
Right.
how I first got, word of Project Possum or gotten in touch with them and like learned about their program to start with was actually just from a camp counselor and me telling her that I was interested in space and her wanting to help out. So it's been super crazy to kind of make those connections and be surrounded by those people who are, always willing to offer some help.
Sure. So as long as it came up right there, why don't we talk about Project Possum? Tell everyone what Project Possum is, and kind of, maybe more importantly, what you do with them, what you've been able to learn through them.
Right. So Project Possum is basically a citizen science organization. So being able to get, anyone participating and helping with science, kind of their kind of experiment or their main mission really has kind of been studying noctilucent clouds, which is a type of cloud up in the upper atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've gone on campaigns, taken images of the cloud, but the ultimate goal would be to possibly have a suborbital flight go up and collect a sample of the cloud. So along with that, they are also partnered with Final Frontier Spacesuit Design. So let's say, we were to go on this suborbital mission, Final Frontier would supply the IVA suit for that mission. But in regards to working with Final Frontier, we also do a lot of tests for the suit. So we've done, for example, like survival training in the suits. So, how well can you swim in them? Do they, hold a lot of water? Can you still get into a life raft while wearing them? Those kinds of things. We've also done multiple microgravity flights, doing all kinds of experiments that are either submitted by members or even we've run a campaign to where students can submit experiments that we can fly. So doing anything like that. So it's basically just a way to get involved in all kinds of different sciences. Obviously their project, but also all kinds of different other campaigns and research opportunities can kind of come from being involved in the program.
And you are certified for suborbital flight, I understand. That's a certification to be achieved, and you've reached that one?
Right. So kind of through Project Possum, they have what's called a Applied Astronautics program, which they are currently developing more to actually get accredited as a master's degree through taking their courses. So basically you have to take, however many of their courses, maybe this bio course, this aero course, whatever, along with several of their campaigns, physically go into these campaigns. And then at the end of that, you would actually be one of the people that could, you'd have to go through all those steps to be qualified as someone who could take the suborbital flight that they want to do to collect a sample of the cloud. So that's kind of their way of like going through like this master's program would certify you for this mission. So I've done the Applied Astronautics program, of course. Now that they're getting it like accredited as like an actual degree, like some of those credits could be actually like, seem more real, I guess. For example, like my college isn't necessarily accepting them at the moment, but getting them more accredited and that kind of thing will kind of help with that. But yeah, basically by doing that, I'm able to possibly participate on one of their suborbital missions when that time comes around.
Sure. Okay. So, and here we were talking a little bit ago about the idea of, there not being an astronaut class, or that it's really just a collection of skills to learn. So let's get into some of those. So being an astronaut would require this whole kind of collection of skills. What are some of those things you have worked at and achieved, and what are some of the things that are still on your list? For example, I believe you are a pilot, and you talked a little bit before about the underwater training. So talk a little bit about some of those things you've crossed off the list that would qualify you for this.
Right. So basically, when I was younger and with Space Camp helping to a degree with this, I kind of decided that I wanted to be more of a mission specialist, research scientist, kind of go down that road and kind of take that route and be more of like a civilian going into the astronaut corps. And so that's kind of why I've chosen to study astrobiology. That way, I kind of just have a broad range of all sciences, because astrobiology is so vague, to be honest. I mean, you can study anything from bacteria to entire planets. It's kind of
Right.
up to you. So that way, it kind of gives me knowledge across so many different levels of science and so many possibilities of things to research. However, along with that, it's also good to have experience in other aspects. Other skills that it takes to be an astronaut. So, like you said, I do have my pilot's license. So I currently have a VFR rating. So this summer, actually, I wanted to do my instrument rating, take that, one next step. So that is the next step that I'm looking forward to doing, is continuing to do some more flying, get that next rating. I'm still not sure how far I'm going to go in terms of flying, if I'll
Right.
go up to commercial and that kind of thing. I'm not sure about that. I definitely want to get instrument, because VFR is kind of useless, and kind of, there's a lot of restrictions to it. So definitely want to do IFR. And then in terms of like scuba diving and those skills, so I have my advanced scuba certification, but also looking at, continuing that as well. Rescue diver, possibly master diver. So there's always kind of more levels to progress to, but definitely kind of getting those exposures. And then, also just being in campaigns, like, some of the stuff I've done with Possum, also, builds skills that, could potentially be used one day.
Sure. So when we're talking about going to Mars, we're talking about, I mean, the timeline is open. No one can put a date on it exactly, but we're talking about, again, it depends on who you ask, but it's 2030s, I think, would be the safest, year to put on it. Some people would probably think we might be able to pull something off sooner, maybe, but let's say 2030s. That's a decade from now, before you're talking about that. Obviously, flying to Mars would not be your first flight. That you're not gonna start with that. But between now and then, what is the plan going forward? You're doing college now. I think I saw a social media post or a reply you had to someone about how you did not apply to become an astronaut in this particular cycle of applications. So what is the plan? When is your time to do that? What are you going to do between then? Teaching, private sector stuff? What are you going to do to keep building that resume for when it is time for you to apply for that program?
Right. So, kind of, the qualifications to actually apply. I mean, obviously needing a bachelor's degree, me being a freshman and not being quite there yet, I wasn't necessarily going to shoot in my application now and hope for the
Yeah.
best. But yeah, kind of like the biggest aspect right now would probably just be, completing school. They've kind of upped the astronaut credentials, slightly to needing, a master's degree as well, which kind of was in my plans already. I was kind of looking towards a master's anyway,
Right.
possibly through International Space University. So definitely schooling, my undergrad and then master's will kind of take up, probably like
A lot of that.
half of
Yeah.
that decade.
Yeah.
And then
Unless you just, do summer school all the time and knock it
right.
out, real quick. That's fine.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it as well on that is going to be work experience as well, because that's another thing you're going to need when applying. So probably, as I continue doing that, hopefully while I'm gaining some work experience, could be a possibility of applying during that time, depending on, when the selections and all kind of line up with what's going on. But probably after schooling, I would try to find, some kind of job, in my area, which would be some sort of astrobiology. Right now, I'm kind of focused more on, I guess, like plants in space. That would be my main focus,
Okay.
but that could kind of change. Like I said, with astrobiology, it can kind of change to something else. But yeah, just kind of working in the field, gaining some direct experience with, something that would be creditable and continuing to build on any other skills that I come across that could possibly be helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want plants, obviously, because you saw the movie The Martian. I'm guessing that's where that.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
my biggest inspiration.
It seems like a good skill to have. I think there's everyone I know who's read that book or seen that movie. There's this kind of running joke among some of my friends, which is how far into the movie until you can no longer accomplish what you're seeing on the screen. And basically it's the farming part where most people are like, yeah, I'm out. I don't know how to make water. How would that work? I don't understand. So yeah, would seem like a good skill to have. So I'm gonna put up, before I get into the next section here, I'm gonna put up a couple of pictures, and I just kind of want you to tell me what these pictures are of. What are you doing in these pictures? And I think there might have been different ages. So tell me, like how
Oh
old you
Lord, you're
are in
gonna
some
try
of
to
these.
make me guess my age.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you guess your age. I have a suspicion that you're gonna be able to guess them pretty easily here. So what you're obviously you're suited up in some sort of simulator or something for this. So what is that all about?
Yeah, so I know this one. So this was
You can ask your dad if he's the one who's gonna know it. I mean, that's fine.
this is a picture from the first week I got involved with Project Possum. So basically, I did kind of like an introductory week at Embry-Riddle, and then from there, I kind of saw if I would continue with the program, kind of continuing to do more and more intense stuff. So this was that first week. So I was 15 here.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I basically went down to Embry-Riddle, spent a week there. So this is like their simulator of what, for example, like a suborbital mission with the, whatever, obviously that's kind of changed around a bit because they were originally
Right.
working with X4, but whatever ship, whatever we're using, to get to suborbital space, this would kind of be a mock-up. But this was really simulating more of their camera system and their collection system that they've been developing to actually attach. So that's kind of what this was. And then the spacesuit being Final Frontier suit. So that's their IVA suit there. So we were trying on their suits, feeling, because it was our first experience with the suits. So just kind of getting a feel for walking around in them, seeing how it is. We actually pressurized the entire thing. So this was actually a large because they didn't have a small at the time. So when it was pressurized, I literally could take my arms completely out of the armholes, and they would just kind of like float there with it being pressurized. But it
Yeah.
was just kind of playing around with spacesuits, and the technology they've been developing to study the clouds.
Yeah. And just jumping back really quick, I meant to add those when we're talking about space camp, I see you suited up here, so it brought it back up. When you're doing space camp and you're doing some of these like mission simulators, obviously you haven't been in space, so you can't sit here and say exactly what it's like or isn't like, but what's your impression of how realistic of an experience a simulator is to actually doing what you would eventually be asked to do?
Right, I definitely think Space Camp does a really cool job at doing their simulations. They have an entire mission floor with missions ranging from, shuttle missions to now moon missions to Mars missions. You have different bases, so you'll have mission control setups, you'll have, the International Space Station, you'll have the moon, the Mars, and all these different setups to be able to simulate different aspects of different missions. So, I mean, obviously, if you're, for example, on the International Space Station, might be a little different because you're not just floating around. You're just kind of standing there. Typically, you do some, small experiments. But I definitely think the cool thing is, like, inside, for example, like the shuttle simulator. I mean, you will just have panels and panels of switches and buttons and consoles to kind of give you an experience of what it would be like to be seen in the shuttle. You have your book, and it's all about finding that switch, doing it in a timely manner, making sure everyone gets everything done. If you're a mission specialist, you have to get out the ship, put on, a fake spacesuit, go out, do your EVA, get back in time before they land, because, in the
That would
simulation.
be bad if you're on the outside during
Right.
landing. Yeah,
In the
yeah. That's on
simulations, they
page
will
1 of the
land without
manual.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it is really awesome to kind of almost put you in this full sensory experience of seeing what it would be like. Sometimes being in that position, let's say seeing all those buttons, can definitely put that pressure on you. Of having to do all of these on by the clock and finding everything and being successful at it. So I do think it is a pretty cool and realistic experience to kind of give you a sense of what it would be like.
Yeah, it's interesting actually that you were doing you're working with a shuttle. I wasn't sure if they would still be using. I mean, obviously the skills isn't just specific buttons in a specific spacecraft, but the process of studying and learning where things are and following an order of procedure and being responsible for that. It doesn't matter what type of spacecraft they put you in, you're going to need to learn that. But it was interesting that you said that they put you in a shuttle.
Right. They have kind of switched. I mean, obviously back, because since I had started going to space camp when I was, 7, so that was like back in 2006. So shuttle was still pretty prominent.
Still going for a few more years, yeah.
Right. And so shuttle was kind of their main missions. As I kind of, I've gotten older, and now that we've switched a little more, they have kind of narrowed down to more Moon and Mars missions. They've kind of swapped out some shuttle simulators for some Orion simulators, that kind of
Right.
thing. So I think currently they still have one shuttle mission that they do. I think they still do it with like the youngest age group, I'm pretty sure. But for the most part nowadays, it is filled with mostly Mars and Moon missions.
Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. Let me get rid of this picture. Let's see. Let me see. There's one more here. Bring this one up. All right. So tell us about this picture. Where are you here? That is clearly not your living room.
Yeah, not my living room. So that is actually at space camp. At the one in Huntsville, Alabama. So they have a mock-up Saturn V at their location in a hall. So this is the tail end of the Saturn V, the 5 rocket engines, as you see there. Honestly, I have no idea how old I was or like why this picture was taken, to be honest, if I remember. But yeah, it was. I do know that's at space camp, and that is the Saturn V.
Yeah, those are pretty. It's kind of. I'm trying to. Well, I was looking at the picture earlier, trying to get the sense of the scale on the picture from where you were standing. So yeah, definitely those are pretty big. All right, so there's a few other pictures I'll bring up as we get to it, but the whole kind of crux here of what we're talking about is going to Mars. So let's, for those who are unaware, that is Mars. For those who are wondering which planet we're talking about, it's the red one. As an astronomer, as amateur astronomer, I can say that it is sadly not the greatest thing to look at through a telescope. It is not going to look like that through a telescope, unfortunately. But your plan is to get way closer than a telescope. It's on average, and correct me if I have numbers. I mean, the orbits with Mars they vary. It's elliptical, so when Mars is on the other side of the sun from us, it can be over 200 some million miles away. On average, it's more like 100 to 140 million miles away. And I think last year everyone got really excited because Mars was going to be super close, and I think that was maybe 40 or 50 million miles away, and it still didn't look very good through a telescope because it's kind of small. But this is Mars. This is where you want to set up shop. So I'm trying to. I have the questions organized here, but I'm thinking about it. So starting. So basically, you get chosen. Let's say you get chosen for a mission to Mars. You get picked. You apply. You become an astronaut. You go through the training. You probably do a few or the missions. First, by the point of going to Mars, you've probably been on the space station. You've probably been on the moon. I'm just guessing, but it's probably something that you will have done before they're going to send someone to Mars. They're going to probably send them to those other places first, for at least for training purposes. And then you're going to head off to Mars. In any of the simulators you've done and any of the other stuff you've done in the space camp, does anyone ever try to get at what a launch is like? Your idea here is to sit on top of a bullet and get launched away from Earth. Do you have any sense of what that feels like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think to some degree. I mean, obviously, I think it is an experience you can't really simulate or kind of recreate in any way. I think it, is pretty unique there.
So Mission Mars
And
at Epcot isn't going to quite be the same thing.
probably,
Yeah.
probably not. I definitely think, getting started, I guess, and feeling what a launch would be like would basically just be, just in general, G's, just giving a sense of like
When you
how
said that was one of your
G-force,
favorite
yes.
things too, was that G simulator?
Right. So actually the most I've done, I think, is like 4.2, something along that range, which obviously is far from a launch.
Right.
So definitely still have to kind of work my G's up a little bit.
Yeah.
But even, seeing what 4 is like and then comparing, what if you were to double that? And what kind of pressure would that feel? But I think that in general, a launch, especially, like the mission to Mars, now it's going to be the biggest, most powerful rocket that we're going to have had. And so it's
Probably that one right there. Is that the plan at this point?
there.
So tell us about that rocket. Actually, I want to make sure that is a NASA image, but I believe it is. That's an illustration. They haven't actually loaded one of those things up like that. So that's an illustration, but it's a very good illustration from the actual pictures I've seen. It really I did have to double check that it was. I'm like, I don't think they've actually set one of those vertical yet.
Yeah,
But yeah, tell us about that rocket. That's your ride right there. So
yeah, so I mean, this is the SLS space launch system that they've been working on for the past few years recently, along with the Orion capsule, which will go on top as kind of the two main components that is going to be involved with the mission to Mars. It's actually been super interesting because down in New Orleans is kind of where they have been building the center core stage. So
that's
it's been
true. You're very close to that. Yeah.
Right. Down at Mishu has been kind of the main focus on that. So I actually went down there not too long ago, and they finished the first center stage. They're working on pumping out the next one. So they're already developing that. So it was pretty cool just to kind of be able to walk inside of like one of those cylinders and really like see how massive this thing is actually going to be once it gets vertical. But yeah, it's been pretty crazy to kind of see this kind of come together and see how it's kind of developed along the way.
Yeah. So the mission's going to start. You're going to be sitting on top of one of those unless they change it between now and then, you're going to be sitting on top of one of those in an Orion capsule. It is, if launched at, and I would assume if they're going to start sending people to Mars, they're going to want to make sure they launch at a most opportune time. So you're talking about 6 months or so of a flight. And it's not exactly the Starship Enterprise. You're going to be walking around. It's a relatively small spacecraft for 6 months. So what goes through your head when you think about being just flying for 6 months?
Yeah, I definitely think, that time and actually going to Mars, it's probably going to be probably the most difficult, kind of along with coming back as well. I would think, going there, you're going to be eager, wanting to get there,
Right.
start really doing what you want to be doing. We're probably just going to try to occupy our time by doing whatever preparations we can do to actually, get ready for being there, any experiments that we can do along the way. So anything we can study in between Earth and Mars, those kinds of things. But, even on the way back, I'm sure we'll be eager to get back and bring everything back. We'll have that same eagerness, especially after being on Mars for, however long they decide to end up leaving us there. So it's going to be, I guess, probably the hardest, because I feel like on Mars it might be slightly more exciting, a few more things to do, a bit more space, but definitely it's just going to be all about teamwork, getting along with each other, trying to be successful in the all of the projects we have to be doing, focusing on our task at hand and being focused on the mission and preparing the best we can for once we get there.
Yeah. We talked about this. We kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but your role on the mission. You talked about mission specialist and the sciences you want to get into. So you're not looking to be the pilot. You're not looking to be the one bringing the thing down for landing. Yeah, I suppose you could be the commander of a mission. But your role on the mission, you see, we talked about that a little bit. But you're talking a little bit more about what you hope to do. You get to Mars. What do you hope to do?
Right, yeah. So kind of, through space camp, the thing that I liked about being like a mission specialist, or I really liked the aspect of just kind of sitting in the back on the ride there, not really having much to do.
Feet
That
up.
wasn't my focus. And then once, we got somewhere, getting out and doing whatever work needs to be done. I always found that super interesting. But yeah, on the mission to Mars, I guess it would be pretty similar. So kind of with an astrobiology background, kind of my biggest interest is just kind of studying Mars almost in general, looking for signs of bacterial life in the water that's on Mars. We have found liquid water, ice, steam, everything in between basically at this point. So
Yeah.
it's going to be super interesting to actually do more in-depth test with that. Also just in general, testing more of the soil, seeing what else is going to be there, maybe something we haven't found, studying the atmosphere on Mars, kind of seeing all the potential that is there. There have been, talks of people wanting to terraform Mars, and
Right.
seeing kind of what can really be done with that. Can it be a second home? Like, can it be a second Earth? Those kinds of ideas. But we can't really fully say that, I feel like, until we actually get there, do some experiments, get some stuff down, know some more stuff about Mars, and get more knowledgeable about the planet. Along this, we'll probably learn a little bit more about the history of Mars.
Yeah.
And so that will kind of be my main, I guess, goal of the mission.
Yeah. If when you arrive and if you're the first one there and you get your boot in that dirt, do you know what you would say? Do you know what I mean? There, I mean, Neil Armstrong set a pretty good bar. Could take a slight revision on the word mankind, but otherwise he set a pretty high bar. I'm guessing you've thought about that. I'm also guessing that you're not interested in sharing that at this point. You're going to keep that one to yourself, but
yeah, no, honestly, I have no idea. I wish I did. I mean, definitely it is interesting because, like you said, I feel like Neil Armstrong just came out with this really well refined phrase, that sticks pretty well,
yeah,
pretty catchy. People will go along with it, and just like trying to either come up with something that would either be as good or halfway as good at this point.
yeah.
It's going to be pretty crazy to actually come up with something that could actually have like that big of an impact. Just thinking about how much we still repeat Neil Armstrong's words. So honestly, I don't necessarily know what I would say, but I guess if all that happens, I have several more years to figure something out. Something out.
I kind of like the idea that someone is going to have something totally rehearsed. They're going to have the most brilliant line ever. They're going to have it all set. And then they're going to set their foot down there, and it's all just going to kind of hit them. And they're going to forget what they were meaning to say, and instead just say like a really bad word, like out of shock. I kind of like that. That's going to end up on a plaque someday, like a swear word, because that's all that they could get out of their mouths when they looked around and realized where they were standing.
Yeah, I definitely feel like, when you first step out, I feel like you're not even going to want to say something, right away.
You don't want to ruin it
like,
for yourself. Yeah, give yourself a moment.
I feel like it's just going to be just like a moment of just like silence almost, that you just have to kind of like take it in first before you're actually able to like formulate, this life-changing sentence that everyone's going to hear.
I mean, you've been inside for 6 months doing crossword puzzles. I mean, you get a moment to just be outside. I think even if you're in a pressurized suit, it's still outside, technically outside. So
right.
So a little bit about, and this is, a little bit more theory because no one's done this yet, and they're still kind of developing systems for this. But so you land, you're there, and now you're going to live on Mars. There is this kind of problem of the more materials you bring with you to go to Mars, the bigger the rocket you need to do it. The bigger the rocket you need, the more fuel. The more fuel, the heavier, the bigger the rocket. And it's just kind of this endless cycle of how big can you really build a rocket to move your entire house, to another planet. So I know that sending materials ahead of time is probably the kind of thing that would happen, that a landing site would get maybe habitat, maybe a lot of supplies delivered first, and then you're going to show up. But there's also been talk that because of radiation, because of weather, because of thin atmosphere and meteorite strikes, that some people think you're going to have a habitat on the surface, and some people think you're going to find yourself a nice cave to be safe in. What are your thoughts on what you've heard about living there? What your house is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, going to Mars, it would, I think sending at least some stuff beforehand is going to be handy. I mean, obviously, like you said, we can only bring so much stuff with us on, the rocket that we're going on. It would be much more ideal to have, more food supplies rather than, pieces of metal in the back. So,
Yep.
definitely it's about prioritizing what is the most important. I mean, of course, we're going to need all those things, but, thinking even just 6 months of getting to Mars, how much food is going to be consumed in that time, and what all is going to be needed for that. So I definitely think there is going to be at least some stuff sent, even if it's not too much. But I think as far as, living on Mars, like you said, they've had, the ideas of having habitat on the surface, but also having a habitat under the surface.
Yep.
So I actually went to Iceland and did some geology training over there, where they're actually starting to look into some of those aspects of actually living under the surface. So in Iceland, they have like old lava tubes, so almost like just these giant tunnels that have been created over time, and they say that they're similar, almost like lava tubes formed on the moon and Mars, and so that's kind of what they're looking at in terms of possibly living habitats on the moon, habitats on Mars, and so basically a good thing going towards moving to possibly one of these lava tubes or caves, whatever, is basically you could have the habitat underground, and that's, like you said, meteorites, radiation to protect from that. But I know, for example, in Iceland, something that they're looking at is if they can take a section of the lava tube and just like pressurize that section. So
Sure.
that way you could have a double barrier of pressurization. So, for example, let's say you lose pressure in the habitat, it's not just like nothing.
Yeah.
You have that second level of, and that like double safety almost for the astronauts there. So that's kind of some ideas that they've been playing around with. But obviously things like the habitat and even food supply is kind of all the problems that are still kind of being worked out today, and kind of will continue to be worked out a little bit until we get a little closer.
Yeah. Do you have and I just put up a picture of the Orion there getting close to Mars, so that's obviously that is an illustration as well. That hasn't happened yet. But that's you'll have a view similar to that at some point. Have you thought about, I have, for example, if we're going to talk about what's behind your shoulder too, some of the cool stuff you have behind you, but so behind me, I'm looking the wrong way. You're going from Earth, which is this little guy, to Mars over here. This is a tourist poster that JPL put together. They put a lot together that were kind of fun. So this is kind of a fake tourist poster of going to a huge mountain on Mars and how to get up to the top of it. Do you have a list of things about Mars that are kind of like, I can't wait to get to Mars because I really want to do this, or I really want to see that? almost a touristy kind of a list. Like I really want to do that. Like I can't wait to go and reboot Oppie Rover and take a selfie with it. You know, I mean, do you have a kind of a list of I'm going to Mars and I'm going to have a mission and I'm going to have a job of what I have to do, but also I really want to do a couple things. There's a few things that I actually want to just experience myself when I'm off the clock, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Mars has, I guess it's like trademark places that is kind of most popular and most noticeable. I mean, Olympus Mons, of course, like being one of them, Valles Marineris as well. Maybe even visiting like the face on Mars, seeing like what it
Yeah.
looks like up close. Does it look like a face up close? And like
Yeah.
all those cool things. So I mean, I feel like those specific landmarks are definitely, I guess, the most interesting thing you're going to see. You know, for example, like Valles Marineris, having a canyon that size and being able to actually see something that large in real life would be incredible. I mean, kind of the same with Olympus Mons, something that big, which is
Yeah.
kind of be a pretty outstanding thing to be able to see. It is going to be pretty interesting because kind of what we see really just depends on the landing site that
Right.
kind of gets designated. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see like if it's just going to be like, you know, for a few craters here and there. Are we going to have, you know, giant giant mountains and all kinds of
Yeah.
things? So it's really cool how the landscape could actually be all kinds of different things depending on where you go on Mars.
Sure. Besides, you know, you're trying, so about 6 months to get there. Again, the details would be determined much later, but you're not going to fly to Mars, spend 6 months flying to Mars, get out, walk around for a couple days, and come home. It's going to be a long trip. I mean, you're talking about around, even just flying there and coming home is a year, and more than a year. But you're going to stay there and you're going to do some work. What besides people? What do you think you're gonna? I mean, you're really eager to get off of this planet. Besides people, what do you think you would? What do you think Mars is gonna lack? What are you gonna miss from the when you're on that flight back home? You're thinking, well, this is gonna be really exciting because I get to do this when I get home.
Yeah, you know, I mean, of course, like probably any astronaut who's been to space, I mean, definitely family and friends is always going to be, you know, the top. And just kind of those personal interactions with people
Yeah,
is always going to be the biggest thing you're going to miss. But
kind of what we're all
I also,
missing now.
right, everyone's experiencing it
Yeah, you're
a
getting a
little.
little bit of Mars training right now. Yeah,
But definitely I think as well, just like fresh air, grass, trees, just kind of like the nature feel of Earth.
colors.
The color more
Yeah,
than just red. But I just
yeah,
think like the natural like home nature feel that we have here on Earth that we don't really put that much thought into on a daily basis. But
right.
you know, having grass in your yard, you know, we're not gonna have grass just growing
Yeah,
outside the door of our habitat. And so I think just being able to come back like take a moment, breathe fresh air, you know, see a tree every now and
go
then.
get the mail without putting
So,
on a suit and going through protocol checks
right,
before
yeah,
you
being
do that.
able
Yeah,
to just walk outside without
yeah,
having to go through all these complications, I think is going to be something really awesome to come back to.
yeah, yeah. Um, there's, and I'm forgetting the name because there's a lot of different groups involved with there's what NASA's doing, there's what private industries are doing in different countries about trying to set things up. There's obviously you're talking about sending astronauts to Mars and bringing them home. Other people talk about, well, it's such a long trip. Would people sign up for a one-way trip to really start to form a habitat there? Would you sign up for a mission that was meant to stay?
I mean, I definitely do think that, you know, we are going to work up to that point where, you know, the one way is kind of more realistic. Obviously, I would prefer to come back.
Yeah,
But I would say that if, for example, if like one way was the only option, I would still, you know, want to support and go on the mission
yeah,
and kind of do all those things. But I definitely think, especially for the first missions, almost a return trip is just really needed. You know, it's just crazy to think that we would have, you know, all these people go to Mars, do all this crazy stuff, and like not bring a Mars rock back or something like that.
right, yeah,
I feel like there's certain things that are kind of just going to need to kind of occur before that. At the same time, we can only bring so much scientific equipment with us to Mars. We can only fit so much in the rocket. I think.
Oh, uh-oh. All right, so it looks like we must have lost an internet connection, because unless you all have a different screen from me, I'm the only one I see. So we're going to give her a minute to hop back in here. It shouldn't take too long. We'll give her a second to do that. Are you back now? I hear you. Oh, there you are. I see you now.
One.
There we go. Were we both by ourselves there? I wasn't sure.
I have no idea. I wasn't even gone because I could still see you, but
Okay. Whatever. You're back now. Who cares? Yeah, for me, all of a sudden, yeah, I was the only one on the screen, and I was like, "Well, wow, that's not right." So, all right, good. Well, you're here now, so wonderful. Let me figure out where I was at here. We're talking about the one-way trip and colonizing Mars. What would you? So, getting into just kind of the more a little bit more personable things about a trip to Mars. When you get that return trip, you come back, you're back on Earth. There's probably a quarantine procedure that will be around, that'll be going on. You'll be stuck somewhere, not going anywhere for a little bit, and then they'll be out. Hopefully a massive parade of some sort. Hopefully there will be parades by then, so there'll be a big parade. What do you want to eat your first day back? What do you, you're going to be on that flight and you're like, look, Mars did not have this. I need to go to this restaurant, or I need to have this particular food. What are you eating when you come back?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Definitely being from Louisiana, I love Louisiana food so much. Basically, probably anything like that. Honestly, a good crawfish boil would be excellent to have.
Yeah.
I could probably, push my record for the amount of pounds I would eat after I get back. I could probably go through a good bit. But
I've been to
anything
New
like that.
Orleans. I had the boil there. I've had the crawfish there. It's one. I had a couple of weeks ago. I had some delivered to us, and it's Cajun boil in Chicago is not the same as Cajun boil in Louisiana. That's for sure. But
Right.
with the lack of being able to go to New Orleans, it was pretty good. So yeah, that I sign off on that. That would be a wonderful thing to have first time back. You're in a good spot if you're going back to Louisiana. You've got good food there to.
Right. Exactly.
So let's see. Just I'm checking off to the side here of the questions people gave me. You were in a Super Bowl commercial. How does that happen? Do you even know how that happens?
Honestly, it was very quick, very last minute, very kind of just put together to kind of go and be a part of this. But basically, yeah, I was in the Super Bowl commercial for SodaStream, and it was pretty crazy. So it was during my Christmas break. So actually, we quickly filmed that before I went back to school to do my semester. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We were, filming out in LA, being on set, all day, doing, whatever needed to be done. But it was definitely a really neat experience. And then also a lot, of course, a lot of other people on sets were like actors. And so they were super interested to, ask some questions to kind of build on their roles and kind of get more,
that's
into
interesting. They would be latching onto you as a source. That's good.
Right.
That's good to know.
And it was, they kept asking, like, oh, is this habitat, like, is this realistic, and all those fun things. So it was a pretty cool project to be a part of.
You had a Nike commercial go up a week or so ago, and beyond just how kind of amazing it is that obviously amazing for you personally that you'd be working with Nike on something like that, but even just to me, the idea that Nike was seeking out, I mean, clearly they went off the beaten path a little bit to decide that they were going to feature a future astronaut as opposed to who maybe they would normally feature. So that's pretty, I mean, 2 days, I think it was 2 days before your ad went up, they posted a LeBron ad. So, I mean, it's pretty good company that one day Nike's talking about LeBron and the next day they're talking about you. So how to talk about that Nike stuff a little bit. What do you do with them?
Yeah, so kind of the stuff with Nike. So Nike, so kind of the main thing was focusing on their Nike Air Max campaigns, and so we were kind of focused on on of course their shoes. So we are doing like some product shots, but also just kind of trying to connect it to space in a way. So like the feel of light as air and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So trying to make any connections as well. Also trying to give more of a story and background of all the physical aspects that go into wanting to become an astronaut as well. All the staying fit and doing being involved with different things. I also did some stuff talking about yoga with Nike. Talking about how beneficial yoga could be both physically but also mentally, and how that could be something utilized on something like a mission to Mars to be able to
6 months on a spacecraft would probably be a good
right?
yoga's probably a good skill to have on there. Yeah.
Right, pretty good time to practice some yoga or do something like that. So just trying to not only make space relatable, but also just kind of connect it all in some way. And then, of course, promoting their shoes and all their new lines that they're coming up with. But yeah, it was just kind of those main projects with working with them. And then we also had conversations of this space hipster shoe that they were coming out with using recycled parts from factories, so basically like just sweeping the floor of their factories and turning it into a shoe, which of course everything in space is recycled, so it was a huge connection to kind of draw of how important it is to continue recycling as much as possible.
So when we started this, I had told you we'd keep you about an hour. We've hit that hour. I'm gonna go, if possible, I'm gonna go rapid fire through a couple little quick things that people had asked about. One, someone actually put a comment in here that they asked about Spanish, about different languages. I'm guessing you've learned a few different languages in the course of your work. I'm guessing different languages is something, maybe particularly Russian languages is a particularly important language for an astronaut. How many languages do you speak a little? How many languages are you totally solid, can go to a country and have a good conversation in?
Yeah, so I went to an international immersion school, so K through 12. I learned 4 different languages, so I was kind of fully immersed in those languages. So through that, I kind of became fluent in Spanish and French. And then we were also taught Mandarin, so I was taught Mandarin for a good bit. That one, like since leaving high school, that one's kind of faded out a little bit, so I can kind of like still make conversation, but it definitely, I feel like, wasn't built as strongly as my French and Spanish were, which I feel like is just always going to be up here.
Right.
Definitely, I've tinkered a little bit with getting into Russian, which I totally want to continue learning, as well as just traveling. I've kind of picked up on some other languages, lost them, picked them up, whatever. But since I grew up learning so many different languages, it's made it easier to actually learn other languages. So being in other countries, I can kind of pick up the language, being there a little over a week or something like that.
Yeah. So if there's a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid, watching this or watching this later, they're trying to figure out, all right, so what should I be doing now? It's trickier. People can't really go as many places right now, but someone's watching this and they're thinking, all right, so I want to be where she is when she at her age, what she's accomplished, where she's in school with her mission ahead. This I want to follow her. I want to be the next wave of people coming in, in waves to Mars, and other NASA missions to other places. What would your advice be to a kid watching this? And if possible, can you tell us that in English and then tell us that in Spanish?
God. Okay, so I'm gonna give kind
We're
of like
saving
my
the tough stuff for the
answer.
end.
I'm gonna give my longer answer, I guess, in English.
Yeah,
and then
I
probably
understand.
in Spanish, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, basically, I would tell, anyone who is interested in wanting to do this, first, you really have to figure out what you want to do in terms of being an astronaut, what area you want to go into, whether that is, being a pilot, being, studying robotics, studying aerospace engineering, whatever you want to focus on. And basically, learn as much as you can about that, see how you can get involved. Start by just looking in your local area, maybe what things you can go and do possibly after quarantine,
Yep.
or what is available, or even just looking up online what's available, what maybe there's YouTube videos of a NASA mechanical engineer explaining how they got to where they are, or whatever it might be. So definitely just try to do a little bit of research first.
Just
I would
kind of
also say to
sponge a
be
little bit.
right. And then also be pretty vocal about your dreams as well. It's very important to tell people what you want to do, what you're interested in, because you never know who someone's going to know or what opportunities may come from that. So really be open to expressing what you want to do, and what you're interested in. And then after that, really just continue working, follow that dream, try to find as much as you can. But yeah, really follow it. Um, and then I guess for my Spanish bit here,
Yep,
um,
go for it.
espero que ustedes pueden seguir tus sueños y sus sueños. Es importante para lograr hasta esos sueños y hacer lo que tú quiero.
All right. Great. Thank you, Sam. The person who was asking about that, I think, is very grateful that you were able to do that for them. So de nada to them. Real, just hit these last couple before you go. That suit behind you, hanging over your shoulder there. What is that suit right there? What is that?
Yeah, so this is so it is a fake suit. It's not a real suit. We're not that classy up in here. But yeah, so
The other
it's
one, the
a
real one's at your dorm still, probably. You haven't been
right,
able to get it.
right.
Yeah.
But no, so it's a obviously like a fake suit. It does have Buzz Aldrin's signature on it, which is pretty darn
See,
cool.
yeah.
We snazzied it up just a little bit. But yeah, so it's basically kind of like just a moon aspect of the room, I guess. So even down here I have like almost like a little plate that has Neil Armstrong's quote on it, gotta put that on stuff. But just kind of having a little bit about the moon as well, because I think that kind of in our space museum we try to like collect some stuff here, just from things that we've come across along the years. We actually got the suit at Cosmosphere in Kansas, so it's kind of just like
Okay.
a visitor center, but they also
Yeah.
have like their own sort of like camp program. Yeah, so it was in the gift shop. So we got it from the gift shop there at the Cosmosphere. But yeah, definitely pretty cool to just have Buzz Aldrin's signature in general. But just the fact that it was on a suit made it really cool, kind of like a must-have to put in the museum.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then really a favorite space movie or book.
Yeah, definitely my favorite, I guess, space movies. I mean, obviously, I do enjoy The Martian. I thought that was a very good movie. Another one of my favorites is Apollo 13. I think that's such a good movie. I feel like you can just, every time you watch it, it's like just a good movie to watch again. Like, it doesn't necessarily get old. I also think just in general, like Hubble documentaries can be like super
All right.
interesting,
Yeah.
just because, like, just even if you aren't like super into stuff, even just seeing like all the pretty and colorful galaxies, I feel like kind of draws people anyway. But I think being able to look at different galaxies, different shapes, kind of learning more about different things that are happening in space, star nurseries, all kinds of crazy stuff, can be super interesting.
Yeah. So in The Martian, he gets stuck there, and he gets stuck basically listening to disco, which is, I think, a massive cautionary tale for anyone looking to go to Mars, is to make sure you bring plenty of your own music. So 6-month flight, over a year sitting on Mars. What are you listening to?
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I definitely feel like the music I'm listening to now probably wouldn't be the same as what I'd be bringing to Mars, to be
That's
honest.
true. Yeah. If it was now,
I
though,
mean,
what
like
would you
right,
pack? If you're going next week, what are
right.
you putting in with you?
Yeah, I mean, probably like right now. I mean, I am a big fan of Khalid. He is probably one of my favorite artists. I've been to his concerts, did a meet and greet, like full shebang. Like
Yeah.
fan of his music. I'm also a pretty big Post Malone fan. I like his music as well. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, just a lot of, I guess, basic pop. But
Yeah.
yeah, probably stick out with like my two main art. Maybe some like really old Taylor Swift. Throw some of that in there, for when we get
I love that
really
it's
far.
I'm gonna, when I go back and try to put like a highlight of the video together, I'm gonna go back and isolate the phrase "old Taylor Swift" because that's not exactly a phrase that registers to people of my generation that way, that Taylor Swift is old. So and very last thing before I let you go, NASA Blueberry is like your social media. NASA Blueberry one, I think, is the Instagram one, but then NASA Blueberry is Twitter. And you got Blueberry on your suit, so that's like your call sign that you get to pick one when you go to space camp. Is that how that works? And this one kind of stuck, or what's with Blueberry?
Yeah, so it is my call sign. You don't get to pick it though, so it has to
Oh.
have some kind of semi-embarrassing situation behind it, I suppose. And so yeah, so I got Blueberry because one of the times I went to space camp, I think it was my second one. Obviously, a lot of the counselors had on like their flight suits, and me wanting to be an astronaut, I went in the flight suit as well. But I was too small at the time, since I was a young little girl, to actually fit in any of the flight suits that they had. So we ended up finding almost like a knockoff brand flight suit, basically. That was just kind of like a darker shade of blue, just like not exactly the
Yeah.
right one. And so while wearing that, my counselor called me a blueberry, saying that I looked like one, being all small and blue. And so throughout, the day, people would be like, "Oh, Blueberry, can you go do this?" and start calling me Blueberry. And then, I came back the next year to go to camp, and they were like, "Oh, look, it's Blueberry." And it just kind of
Oh, yeah.
continued,
You got to own it
but
at some point. Yeah. You can't fight it
yeah,
at
so
some point.
after that it kind of stuck, and especially in their aviation program, everyone actually gets call sign when you go to camp. And
Okay.
so especially everyone on the aviation side were super strong about keeping my call sign, and they were like, "Nope, you're Blueberry, like it's settled." So yeah, so that's just kind of how that all developed.
I think mine would be motion sick. So I would be the wrong person you would want sitting next to you for 6 months on a flight to Mars. I don't do well on even just being a passenger in a car. So yeah, I'm the wrong person to go. So I'll just sit in my chair and talk to people about going to Mars. That's much better. Yeah, motion sick would be mine. That tumbler, what was the thing you talked that kind of tumbles
Like
you around where you
tumble
try to get out of a
spin.
spin? Yeah, that I can't. That's a nightmare. Just the idea of that, it's a nightmare to me. So, all right. Well, yeah, we've definitely kept you longer than we said. So I really appreciate you staying on. I wanted to give you a chance. So you have a foundation. I almost forgot. You have a foundation. So tell us about your foundation. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick. So I have a Blueberry Foundation, which originally was kind of to just help get kids go to space camp. It's kind of more recently been kind of partnering with some people, for example, like in other countries. So we've most recently partnered with a group in Mexico, a group in Argentina, and getting more kids, kind of help them figure out, how they can actually bring kids to space camp, scholarship opportunities, kind of walking them through more of a process of getting them in contact with space camp, getting them in contact with those scholarship opportunities to be able to encourage them and help them out any way we can, and actually getting more kids to space camp, because I know how helpful it was for me, and actually giving more kids that experience.
All right, good. Well, good. Thanks for doing that. And so I think we're gonna wrap things up here. If you enjoyed this, I thank you very much for watching it. It's gonna be posted. You can share it, but you can watch it later. Tell if you're watching this and you think someone else should watch it, tell them to watch it later. If you really like it, subscribe to the channel. It's a new channel, so you will definitely stand out as one of very few subscribers, so I appreciate it. But take a look. I have other videos on there of some other really cool people. Someone from JPL who was a part of the Opportunity mission, who flew the Cassini spacecraft around Saturn. So, an astronomer, an astrochemist who is studying Enceladus and some of the icy worlds around the solar system. So some really smart people if you check out some of the other videos I have. So take a look at those. I'll keep doing more of these because no one's going anywhere for a little bit. So I'll find some other cool people to bring on. But Alyssa, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you so much for getting kids to get really excited about STEM and space and science. It's wonderful to see, and good luck to you and hopefully we will keep in touch in the future as you get ready for your inevitable trip to Mars.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks.